Hey there. Just wanted to share with you all kind of a light bulb moment I had this morning. And if you have a pulse and you live in the U.S., you know that we had an election a few days ago. The majority of people in our country voted for Donald Trump. Some of us did not. And we're sad and frustrated and worried about the implications of the outcome of the election. And so I've been grappling really since Wednesday, because that's when we got the election results. I've been grappling with this idea of how do we stay spiritually grounded but not have it turn into spiritual bypassing. By spiritual bypassing, I mean sort of the glib answers that people of faith sometimes give in difficult times. Don't worry, God's got this. We like to quote verses about not being worried and putting everything and trusting everything to God. And I think sometimes we are too quick to go to those things in challenges and traumas that are playing out. And so I don't want to do that. I want to be aware of my own feelings, which are deep and some sorrowful and some anxiety. And I want to be mindful of that with others as well. And even that my circumstances as a white woman married to a white man, I have privilege here, and I want to check that and be aware of it. And so how do I hold that intention with this whole awareness of the larger picture, which is that I'm a follower of Christ, and what does that mean? And then as a minister talking to other people about this stuff, how should I be talking about that in a way that's sensitive to others? And I don't know if I've done a great job of it this week. I've been trying, but I haven't really known even how to think about it. And I had sort of a light bulb moment this morning for me. I was sort of doing my meditation and some reading this morning, and the thing that came up in the app I've been using on my phone is this story from John 2. And a similar story is told also in Mark 11. These are two Gospels, the Gospels of John and Mark. Both of them tell this story with one gives some details, the other fills in some other details. So I'm kind of combining what I'm saying here from those two places. But Jesus goes to the temple in Jerusalem, and he walks in and he sees in the outer courtyard that there are people buying and selling, and there's money lenders, and he gets really angry, and he gets a whip, and he says to them, this is supposed to be a house of prayer, and you've turned it into a den of robbers. And he cracks the whip and drives people out. And so there have been multiple explanations for what he was angry about. The one I've always heard was that he was angry because it seemed as though people were being cheated. There were people journeying there from far away to worship in their house of worship. The place where they believed God lived was there in Jerusalem. And so people came from long distances. They were required as part of their religious rituals to sacrifice perfect, unblemished animals. And so they often had to buy those animals once they got there. And so there's this theory that they were being overcharged, and someone was basically taking advantage of the fact that they were travelers who had no other choice but to pay these exorbitant prices if they were going to fulfill the requirements of their worship. So that's one theory, and that might be right. But there are also a couple things else to be aware of. One is that, the Jewish people had been through such trauma. If you read in the Hebrew scriptures, they were taken over by the Assyrians, and then later the Babylonians, taken into captivity. They were in exile. And so all these generations of traumatic things had happened to them. And so when they broke free from that oppression and were back together in Jerusalem, the city had been destroyed, the temple had been destroyed, and so they came back together and they were able to rebuild the temple. And it was a symbol not only of God's presence there with them in their religious structure, but it also was sort of a symbol of national pride that we have our groove back. We're back together. And so there's this theory that Jesus was also frustrated by this idea of nationalism, because when we've been traumatized, our natural reaction is to sort of hunker down, protect, make what's ours only. There's not this idea of let me share and look out for other people. If we've been traumatized, we've just learned to look out for me, to protect me. And when we're in a place where we don't necessarily need to be on that high of alert anymore, well, that's how we've learned to think and behave, and so we keep doing it. And so Jesus is saying, hey, you guys, we don't need to be like that. We don't need to hang on to this temple as like this symbol that's only for us. Which takes me to my next point about why he was angry. This temple was constructed in such a way that at the center was the Holy of Holies. It was believed to be the space where God actually was present and living. And so in the middle is the Holy of Holies. And then there's other spaces where you kind of go concentric, it's really circles, it was squares, but you kind of keep moving away from the center. And so depending on your status in that society, that determined where you were in those rings, like how close did you get to be. So women, eunuchs, foreigners, they were further out. And so this place where this particular incident happened was in the courtyard that was there for foreigners to come. Now, they would be people who weren't part of the Jewish faith. They weren't probably observing Jewish customs and dietary laws and all that good stuff. But they had some interest in worship, and they could come there, they could meet with rabbis and teachers, and they could worship as they were in this outer courtyard. So Jesus comes in, the outer courtyard that was supposed to be for the foreigners is now being used by the folks who sort of like have they're protected, this belongs to us kind of mindset, and they haven't left room for the foreigners to worship. So Jesus is, I think, also angry about the fact that you guys are excluding people. We have people that we should be allowing in, that we should be including. And instead, we've turned their space into something where they don't even have a place to come now. And so he was angry about this injustice. So I'm seeing in Jesus this example of someone who sees injustice and responds to it. He doesn't just kind of go, oh, I'm, God in human form, everything's going to be okay. Like, he gets in there and mixes it up. And I think it's interesting because in the account that John tells of this story, we get down to, it's chapter 2, it's verse 18. The leaders are seeing all this unfold where he's coming in with this whip and driving people out. And it's like, who does this guy think he is? And so they come to him and they say, what sign can you show us for doing this? And in other words, like, who are you? Like, why would you come in here and do this? Who do you think you are? And so Jesus responds, destroy this temple, and in 3 days, I will raise it up. Okay, so now, like, what is he threatening? Our space, our sacred space, our symbol of everything that we have worked to rebuild? And so they say to him, the temple's been under construction for 46 years, and you will raise it up in 3 days? So now John tells us the next couple things in hindsight. He's writing with with the hindsight of someone who's sort of seen the whole story of Jesus play out. And so John says this, Jesus was speaking of the temple of his own body. He was referring to his own body as a temple because he was God. He was the sacred. Okay. So John says Jesus, when he said, destroy this temple and I'll raise it up in 3 days, he was talking about his own self. He was talking about his body. And John says then, after he was raised from the dead, his disciples remembered that he had said this, and they believed the scripture and the word that he had spoken. So while Jesus has handled this very specific problem in this particular moment and this context that he was in, and was calling to order people who he felt had forgotten the narrative, he was also remembering there's something bigger going on here. Yes, there's injustice, and I'm going to do something about that, and I'm going to speak up about it. But also be aware that this is more than just what's happening right here. There's something bigger going on. There's the good news of God at work. There's the awareness that someday they will have, if they want to see it, that this was part of something bigger, that God lives not just in a building, but God lives among us, in us, around us, through us. God's love is present everywhere, and we are invited to participate in that. And so I want to sort of challenge this false narrative that a lot of us are seeing right now, where we feel like either we have to be in there mixing it up, and we're not allowed to experience peace, we're not allowed to experience joy, because people are suffering and things may get worse. And so we have that narrative, and then we also have the narrative of like, head in the clouds, woo woo, God will take care of it, I don't have to worry. Those things need to come together, because here's the thing. This stuff, this temporal stuff that's bad, it's hard to stay in there and speak up for what's right. It's hard to do what you've been called to do, to challenge it, to resist the things that are evil. It's hard to do all that unless we are spiritually grounded. We need to be aware of our spirituality. We need to tend to it. But that should not inspire us to close our minds to what's happening. It should inspire us to do something and to do it better, to be empowered, to be strengthened, to have the wisdom of God, to have the love of God come into this situation. It's not about me doing things as my own private self. It's about me being emboldened by the love of God, that the words of God come out of my mouth when I am in situations that are difficult, that the love of God somehow comes out of me when what I really want to do is punch somebody in the face. And so if we are going to be effective in our work and our witness as followers of Christ who insist on better treatment for ourselves and for others, we need to be spiritually grounded, spiritually aware. So whatever it is that you do to tend to your spirituality, and I don't care if it's Christian practices or not. I mean, that's what's been meaningful for me. And so I hope that you find meaning in those things too. But whatever it is that you want to call it, if you want to call it God, call it capital L love, call it the universe, be aware of the fact that you are part of something larger, that there's something greater at work. There's a force of love in the universe that is around you. And it's hard to see it sometimes when it seems as though evil is persisting, but it is there. We know it's there because we see good in people still. We still feel a draw to love and to be loved. There is good around us. There is good available to flow through us, to comfort us, and to strengthen us for the things that we need to do in the here and now. Don't spiritually bypass. Be spiritually grounded for the things that need to be done today. Jesus, I think, encapsulates that in this story. And here is our example of being able to do the same. So go, be loved, and be love.